A self-proclaimed alpha survival expert was about to ruin a young waitress's life just to protect his fake reputation. He thought his millions and his gold-plated G-Wagon made him untouchable. But when a quiet stranger with a Belgian Malinois stood his ground, the bully issued a lethal mountain challenge, expecting a viral win. He had no idea he was staring into the eyes of an Air Force PJ, a man trained to save lives in the deadliest storms, now ready to deliver a brutal lesson in reality. Before we begin, tell us where you are watching from, and if you believe in real honor, hit that subscribe button. The crisp mountain air of Aspen usually carries the scent of fresh pine and wood smoke, a quiet playground for the world's elite where status is the only currency that matters. But that morning, the silence was shattered by a voice that sounded more like a serrated blade than a human greeting. Julian Vane stood beside his gold-plated G-Wagon, his designer survival gear looking more like a costume than functional clothing. He was the self-proclaimed king of this mountain, a man whose millions were built on selling a version of masculinity that existed only behind a camera lens. Standing before him was Maya Reed, a young resort employee whose face was pale with exhaustion. A tray of supplies lay scattered on the frozen ground, and a single, insignificant splash of mud had marred the pristine fender of Julian's vehicle. "Do you have any idea what this detailing costs?" Julian roared, his face twisting into an ugly mask of rage. "You clumsy, incompetent girl! You think a sorry covers a 5-figure paint job?" Maya was trembling, her hands raised in a silent plea. "I'm sorry, sir. The ice. I slipped." Julian stepped closer, invading her personal space. "Get on your knees," he hissed. "Wipe it off with your bare hands. Now." The tension was broken by the low, rhythmic crunch of boots on packed snow. Caleb stood a few feet away, dressed in a worn, tactical jacket that had seen more real miles than Julian's entire wardrobe. Beside him, Ranger, the Belgian Malinois, stood perfectly still, a low vibration starting in his chest, a living warning sign that the atmosphere had shifted. "She said she was sorry," Caleb said. His voice wasn't loud, but it held the absolute authority of a man who had commanded rescue missions in the heart of hurricanes. Julian spun around, his orange-tinted tan deepening into a shade of crimson. To the world, Julian was a titan, but Caleb saw through the shiny cape. In psychology, this is known as fragile self-esteem. When a man builds his entire identity on external symbols, the cars, the badges, the followers, even a speck of mud feels like a lethal strike to his soul. Julian wasn't defending a car. He was defending a lie. "You want to be a hero?" Julian sneered, eyeing Caleb's simple gear. "Fine. Tomorrow noon, the North Woods. A survival match. Let's see if you're as tough as you look without the dog, or if you're just another pretender." Caleb looked at the fear in Maya's eyes, then back at the bully. "I'll be there," he replied. It wasn't a boast, it was a promise. Julian's laughter followed Caleb like a foul wind, but the stranger didn't look back. Caleb simply adjusted the strap of his bag and kept walking, the rhythmic thud of his boots on the frozen pavement the only response. Ranger didn't bark. A bark is a waste of energy for a dog like him. Instead, the Malinois stopped for a split second, his amber eyes locking onto Julian with a predatory stillness that made the bully's smirk falter. It wasn't a threat. It was a promise, written in the language of a hunter. Inside the resort's management office, the air was thick with the scent of expensive leather and Julian's unearned arrogance. He didn't just want Maya gone, he wanted to erase her. "A diamond-encrusted watch is missing from the penthouse," Julian told the trembling manager, his voice dripping with fake concern. "I saw her near the room. She's not just clumsy, she's a thief." Within the hour, Maya was escorted out into the biting Colorado cold, her final paycheck withheld, and a reputation shattered. Julian watched from the window, sipping a glass of vintage scotch, convinced he had cleared the board before the game even began. Many would wonder why Caleb didn't end it right there on the sidewalk. Why wait until noon? Why let a man like Julian breathe another day of unearned glory? In the world of special operations, this is the tactical mindset. Caleb wasn't a street brawler. He was an Air Force PJ. He knew that uncontrolled emotion is a liability, but controlled aggression is a tool. He needed this time to read the terrain. He wasn't just preparing for a fight, he was preparing an execution of a character. While Julian spent the night posting boastful videos to his millions of followers, Caleb sat in the shadows of his small rental cabin, his hands steady as he checked his gear. He was dismantling Julian's history, finding the cracks in the foundation of the Alpha Kingdom. He knew that to stop a bully for a day, you use your fists. To stop a predator forever, you use the truth. The storm was coming, and Caleb was the one who had invited it in. The wind howled through the pines as Caleb walked toward the solitary metal bench at the edge of the resort. Maya sat there, huddled in a thin cardigan that was no match for the Colorado winter. Her head was bowed, her shoulders shaking with the weight of a life that felt like it was breaking. Ranger approached first, nudging her hand with his wet nose and leaning his heavy, warm frame against her legs. It was a silent offer of solidarity. "I can't lose this job," Maya whispered, her voice cracking as she looked up at Caleb. Her eyes were red-rimmed and hollow. She clutched a small cardboard box, and inside, peeking through a gap, was a photo of a young boy in a hospital bed. "My brother. He has a heart condition. The surgery is Tuesday. Without my paycheck, the insurance, the hospital, they won't even admit him." Caleb looked at the box, then at the girl. To Julian Vane, she was an insect to be crushed. But Caleb saw a warrior. This was Maya's silent battle. While Julian played hero for his millions of followers, Maya was waking up at dawn, scrubbing floors, and enduring insults just to keep her brother's heart beating. Her war had no cameras and no applause. It was a war of survival, fought in the quiet, freezing corners of a resort that didn't care if she lived or died. She wasn't weak. She was exhausted from carrying a world that Julian Vane could never understand. "Look at me," Caleb said. His voice was a low anchor in the storm. "He isn't going to miss that surgery. That is a soldier's vow." Midnight came to the aspen woods like a heavy velvet curtain. Caleb sat by a small fire near his cabin, but his eyes were never on the flames. Ranger's ears swiveled toward the dark tree line, his hackles rising into a rigid ridge. Two figures emerged, Julian's hired muscle, moving with the clumsy confidence of men who thought they were hunting a tourist. They never saw the shadow launch itself from the darkness. Within seconds, the silence was replaced by a clinical takedown. Caleb didn't use anger. He used precision. By the time the moon peeked through the clouds, the intruders were neutralized, and the real predator was finally ready for his noon appointment. At noon, Julian's Alpha Camp was a spectacle of cameras and aggressive music, a stage set for a hero who didn't exist. Julian bounced on his feet, wearing custom gear that shone under the high mountain sun. But the music died the moment Caleb stepped onto the field. He wasn't the quiet hiker anymore. He was an Air Force PJ in full-service uniform, the fabric sharp and the gold crest on his chest gleaming with an authority that Julian could never buy. "Ready to lose in front of your fans?" Julian sneered, launching a wild, televised haymaker. Caleb didn't even blink. He slipped the punch with the surgical efficiency of a man trained to neutralize threats in the middle of a storm. Julian tried to cheat, throwing a hidden kick and a handful of ice, but Caleb caught his wrist with a grip like a steel trap. Then, a sharp, sickening crack echoed through the clearing. Not from the fight, but from a nearby training ledge. A young student had fallen, his leg pinned under a heavy timber, blood staining the white snow. Julian froze. His face
Julian
turned a
froze.
ghostly shade of white
His face
as he
turned
looked
a
at the
ghostly
injury,
shade of white.
then at his cameras. I'm not a doctor.
I can't handle this, he stammered, backing away in pure terror. But Caleb was already moving. He didn't think, he acted. He used his combat medic skills to stabilize the boy, his hands steady as the live stream recorded Julian's cowardice for the entire world to see. Justice didn't end with a victory. It ended with the truth. When the police arrived, they didn't just find an assault, they found a mountain of fraud and endangerment. As Julian was led away in handcuffs, his glossy banners were torn down, revealing the cold, honest stone beneath. The mask had crumbled, and for the first time in Aspen, the truth was finally louder than the lies. The restitution check was in Maya's hand, and her dignity had finally been restored. Caleb didn't wait for a thank you. He simply signaled Ranger into the truck and turned toward the mountain pass, leaving Aspen a little cleaner than he found it. You see, the world is full of wolves who prey on the weak, but it is the sheepdogs, those who refuse to look away, who keep us safe. Real strength isn't about being untouchable. It's about being there for those who are. If this story touched your soul, type Amen in the comments and subscribe for more stories of honor. God bless.